My name is Mia Dalka, and 3 months ago, my boss looked me straight in the eye, smirked in front of the entire product team, and said, "This is why women don't lead." Then he highlighted my entire folder: 10 months of research, diagrams, performance projections, and code, and pressed delete. Everyone in that meeting room froze. Some glanced at their screens, pretending not to notice. Others held their breath. One guy actually laughed under it. But me? I blinked once. Then my phone rang. And when I answered it, what I said made him go pale. Let me take you back to where this really began, because these stories don't start with the final insult. They start much earlier, with subtle patterns that no one calls out until they become impossible to ignore. 14 months ago, I joined Elixis Labs as a senior systems engineer. Not a glamorous title, not something you put in a headline. But behind the scenes, I was the architect behind a product that was going to reshape the way hospitals manage critical patient data. It was secure, scalable, and, most importantly, human-centered. I was brought in by the former CTO, Julian Arman, who left 3 weeks after I started, and that's when Logan Riker took over. Logan was sharp, charismatic in that overconfident, smug sort of way. He shook my hand the first day he came on board and said, "So, you're the girl who likes databases. Cute." I thought I misheard. But over the next few weeks, I realized that was just his style. The kind of guy who thought inclusion meant bringing women in to decorate the meeting table. At first, I ignored it. I was here to do a job, not to win anyone's approval. I buried myself in the product, the back end, the user feedback loops, the AI logic for flagging anomalies in patient vitals. Clients started noticing the improvements. Our beta demo scored 18% better than projected in usability. Hospital administrators requested more updates. And somewhere along the way, Logan started asking for status checks twice a day. But he never asked for my ideas. He never asked how I got the numbers. He just hovered, waiting for something to go wrong so he could pounce. One day during a product review, I presented a streamlined solution for data encryption that could have reduced storage costs by nearly $2.6 million annually across our partner network. Instead of reviewing the code, Logan interrupted me with, "Mia, do you have any actual engineering background or just enthusiasm?" My jaw clenched. I wanted to scream, but I knew better. Because the worst thing you can do in rooms like that is react. So I nodded, thanked him for the feedback, and kept working. Over the next 4 months, I compiled everything: codebase, analytics, integration logs, into a secured folder. I worked nights, weekends, while Logan was golfing with investors. I built what was essentially the spine of the company's future platform. And then came the meeting. Quarterly planning, full leadership team, investors looped in by video. I was told to walk them through the product vision, but right as I connected my screen, Logan cut in. "Actually," he said, "before Mia presents, let me show you something interesting." He walked to the front of the room, took the mouse from my hand like I was a child, navigated to my folder, and said it. "This is why women don't lead." Click, delete. I felt my stomach drop. Not because I couldn't recover the work, I could. It was backed up. But because of the message he just sent. He wanted to humiliate me, publicly, casually, like erasing me was a performance art. But that's when my phone rang. I didn't hesitate. I picked it up. "Yes," I said calmly. "I'll take the CTO position at your company. I accept in the room?" Silent. Logan blinked. His smirk faltered. "Wait, what?" I turned to him and said, "You just made my exit easier than I ever imagined." But trust me, that's just the moment that changed everything. The real story? It's what led up to that call. The choices, the betrayals, the secret I'd been keeping about who was really watching me work behind the scenes. In the next chapter, I'll tell you how that job offer came to be, and how Logan unknowingly helped secure it himself. Because sometimes the most satisfying revenge is when they hand you the weapon themselves. 3 months before that meeting, The one where Logan deleted my folder and told an entire room of executives that this is why women don't lead. I was sitting alone in the break room, microwaving leftover Thai food, when someone I barely knew sat down across from me. Her name was Neha Ramesh, senior UX researcher, usually quiet, polite, invisible by choice. She looked up from her salad and said, "Hey, what you said in that product huddle yesterday about ethical data filtering for misdiagnoses? That was brilliant." I blinked, surprised. I didn't even realize she was listening. "Thanks," I said. I wasn't sure anyone noticed. She smiled. "A couple people noticed. One of them asked for your name. That someone turned out to be Cora Eastman, co-founder of Ethratech, one of the fastest-growing medtech firms in the region. Cora had been sitting in on a product walkthrough as a visiting consultant for a hospital partnership we were piloting. I didn't even realize she was there. But apparently she noticed what Logan didn't, because the next morning I received a LinkedIn message. Short, precise. "Hi, Mia. Would love to hear more about your system architecture work on that Elixis prototype. Do you have 15 minutes sometime this week?" I stared at the message for a full minute. Then I took a screenshot and emailed it to myself, just in case. We spoke that Thursday. It was supposed to be 15 minutes. It turned into 90. She asked smart, probing questions about my data model, my real-time sync system, the latency issues I solved during the rollout. And when I told her that I'd done most of it solo, she paused and said, "You realize that's CTO level work, right?" I laughed. It sounded ridiculous at the time. I was still stuck being talked over in meetings where Logan referred to me as database girl. But Cora wasn't joking. "You think 10 steps ahead," she said. "Most engineers can't think past the next sprint. You're solving structural problems." After that call, she didn't offer me a job. Not right away. She just said, "Stay in touch and keep doing what you're doing." I did. Over the next 2 months, we exchanged emails. I shared articles, white papers, updates on new client feedback from the hospitals. She asked deeper questions. Never pushy, never aggressive, just watching. And meanwhile, things at Elixis were getting worse. Logan started taking credit in front of execs for the same architecture I built. He'd say things like, "We've been restructuring back-end integrations," even though he hadn't written a single line of code. When I privately confronted him about it once, he shrugged and said, "Leadership is about narrative, Mia. Not details. Learn to sell or stay invisible." That was the moment I knew I was never going to be promoted. Not by him. Not in that building. It didn't matter what I built. He saw me as an obstacle to his spotlight. So I stopped waiting for his approval and started documenting everything. Not for HR. Not to fight him, but for me. I compiled detailed records of every innovation I was responsible for. I built a private portfolio, architecture maps, live demos, process documentation, all detached from proprietary Elixis material, but showcasing the thought process behind my work. And every few weeks, I'd send a small update to Cora. Not a pitch. Just a, "Hey, thought this might interest you. Here's how I solved this challenge." Then one day, I got the call. "We're ready to expand," she said. "We've been scouting candidates for CTO, and you've been top of our internal shortlist since March." I thought I misheard. "CTO?" "Yes," she said. "And I'm not offering this out of charity or politics. You've been operating at CTO level. You just haven't had the title or the respect." She told me they'd matched my current salary, doubled it, and were offering full strategic control over their next-gen platform, plus equity. All I had to do was say yes. And I didn't. At least not right away. Because I knew something Logan didn't. He still had one last chance to prove what kind of leader he was. One last chance to rise with me, instead of trying to bury me. I gave him that chance in the form of a final presentation. A real-time analytics dashboard that would cut diagnostic lag in critical care centers by 42%. It was the same folder he deleted in front of the entire team. The moment he did, I answered my ringing phone and said what I'd been waiting months to say. Yes, I accept the CTO position. But what Logan didn't know, what no one in that meeting knew, is that he himself had been part of the reason I was hired. Because sometimes your enemies don't just underestimate you, they accidentally help you rise. In the next chapter, I'll show you exactly how Logan's behavior during those final months made Cora's decision even easier, and how his obsession with control became the very thing that destroyed his credibility. Because when you treat someone like they're invisible, you often forget they're watching. And sometimes, so is everyone else. By the time I accepted the CTO offer from Ethratech, I wasn't angry anymore. That surprised me. I thought I would be. I thought I'd feel the burning need for revenge or justice. But instead, all I felt was clarity. Because Logan didn't just delete a folder, he deleted the last illusion I had that people like him could ever be reasoned with. He didn't want partnership. He wanted ownership. Of credit, of control, of perception. And the most dangerous part? He was good at it. At least, at first. After he deleted my work in that meeting, the room fell silent. No one spoke up. No one protested. People stared at their laptops or the floor. I knew most of them didn't agree, but no one wanted to challenge him. That's how people like Logan survive. Through silence. But what he didn't know was that his silence had been leaking cracks for months. And now, I want to show you exactly how he destroyed himself. One misstep at a time. Let's go back 6 months. Back when our lead client, Paragon Health Systems, began preparing to scale their pilot across 5 new hospitals, I was responsible for that integration. They loved the responsiveness, the intuitive interface, the load time improvements, and they sent in written feedback, twice, mentioning me by name. Logan accidentally left those parts out in the executive summaries. He reworded their praise to say, "The Elixis engineering leadership team has exceeded expectations. There was no team. It was just me." I said nothing. I kept building, kept tracking, kept documenting. Because I had started to see it clearly. Logan wasn't just ignoring my work. He was trying to absorb it. He started showing up to meetings unprepared, then using my slides. He began saying things like, "Our back-end strategist suggested this." Never naming me. Never giving me a seat at the table. But he didn't realize that others had noticed too. Small things. Neha once overheard him rewriting one of my code commits into his weekly report. She never said a word, but the next day she quietly slipped a sticky note onto my desk. It said, "Keep your own copy. Just in case." Another time, our junior analyst, Jaden, saw Logan accidentally forward a client message thanking me, and then watched him delete the thread before the all hands. Little things. But they were adding up. I never asked anyone to take sides. I didn't start a whisper campaign or collect allies. I didn't have to. Because the longer Logan tried to silence my presence, the more visible I became to the people who actually paid attention. And then came the turning point. 2 weeks before that disastrous meeting, we had a cross-department workshop with our new AI consultant. He was young, maybe mid-30s, sharp, and clearly annoyed when Logan tried to open the session. "Actually," he said, flipping through the onboarding deck. "Can we hear from Mia instead? She's listed as the architect on most of this." Logan's smile froze for half a second. He recovered, of course. He always did. But it was the first visible crack in his armor. He said, "Mia's good with the technical weeds. But for strategy, Weeds?" I said, before I could stop myself. I met his eyes and held them. Everyone turned. I didn't raise my voice, didn't get emotional. I just said, "You mean the data model that just secured us a $2.1 million expansion contract?" Silence. Then Jaden coughed into his notebook to hide a laugh. Logan didn't respond. He pivoted. He always pivoted. But something had shifted. After that workshop, I started noticing the questions clients asked were directed at me, not him. Follow-ups came to my inbox. Strategy suggestions were forwarded to my private extension. Logan hated it. I could see it in the way he began nitpicking my tone in emails, CCing executives on simple follow-ups, treating every minor issue like a leadership flaw. But here's the irony. All the while he was trying to control the story, he was writing a new one. For someone else. Cora was still watching. She had quietly attended that same workshop. She saw everything. And when I told her later about the deleted folder, she didn't gasp. She didn't sound surprised. She just said, "And that's why your leadership will look nothing like his." By the time I stepped out of that conference room, after calmly accepting the CTO position and announcing my resignation, Logan looked like someone who had just watched the floor collapse under his feet. And yet, he still didn't get it. He stood up, raised his voice like he was reading from a policy manual. "This is highly unprofessional. You can't just quit in the middle of a department meeting. There are procedures. Protocols." I didn't answer him. I didn't need to. Instead, I turned to Gideon Talley, our COO, who had been silent the entire time, arms crossed, watching everything. He didn't say much either, just gave the smallest nod. Logan sputtered something about breach of conduct, about NDA clauses, about poaching. That's when I showed him the offer on my phone. "There's nothing proprietary being taken," I said. "And if clients choose to follow a person over a brand, that's not theft. That's trust." And with that, I walked out. I didn't slam the door. I didn't cry in the parking lot. I just left. It was 9:42 a.m. on a Thursday. By noon, my LinkedIn inbox had 15 new messages. By 5 p.m., I was on a video call with the Ethratech onboarding team. And by Friday morning, the tremors had started inside Elixis. I didn't hear about it directly. But people talk. They always do. Especially when things start falling apart. The first thing I heard? Logan tried to recover my deleted folder. Apparently, he spent an hour with IT trying to roll back the deletion, only to discover that I'd removed my access and backed up every non-proprietary version of my architecture notes to a personal secure drive weeks ago. All completely legal. All clearly documented. He demanded that someone on my team reconstruct the product roadmap from scratch. But here's the thing. There was no team. I was the team. Every person who had contributed to the technical build was either reporting to me or had been looped in because I had asked them to be. There was no backup Mia. And worse, he didn't know where anything was. He didn't even understand how the architecture worked. He had always assumed I was just implementing the ideas he approved. Without me, there were no ideas. Neha told me, quietly, through Signal, that Logan spent the entire day walking from desk to desk with a forced smile, asking people to step up and own the vision. By Monday, 2 client accounts had requested meetings with someone familiar with the original system architect. When informed that I had left, one of them paused and asked, "So, who's in charge now?" That question echoed in more places than Logan expected. I wasn't at Elixis anymore, but my absence created a vacuum that couldn't be spun or dismissed. Because leadership, real leadership, doesn't disappear when you leave the room. Fake leadership does. By Wednesday, I got a message from Gideon. "I know this may be a long shot, but would you be open to a transition consultancy contract? The rollout is in trouble." I read that message twice. The same company that allowed my work to be deleted in front of 24 people now wanted me back, quietly, to fix what was broken. I didn't respond right away, not because I wanted to punish anyone, but because I needed to be sure that I wasn't walking backward into the same fire I'd escaped. Meanwhile, Ethratech was moving fast. I met with the executive team, reviewed our strategic goals, and presented a roadmap that mirrored what I'd tried and failed to implement at Elixis. Only this time, no one interrupted me mid-sentence. No one downplayed the user testing. No one deleted anything. They listened. They asked questions. They valued the process. And the craziest part? In just 3 days, I had made more progress with a lean team of 7 than I'd made in 3 months under Logan's command. Because when you stop having to defend your existence, you get to actually do the work. The next Friday, I got another message. This one from Jaden. Logan's panicking. Client meetings are imploding. Paragon asked if they can follow you to Ethratech. He tried to lie and say you weren't really the lead. They didn't buy it. I stared at that message for a long moment. Not with pride, not with gloating, but with quiet realization. All the long nights, all the dismissals, all the times I was told to stay in my lane. They hadn't been wasted. They had built something solid, something undeniable. Because when your value is real, it doesn't vanish when someone presses delete. I didn't gloat when the first Elixis client jumped ship. I didn't send a message. I didn't make a call. All I did was update my LinkedIn profile to reflect my new position. Chief Technology Officer, Ethratech. That was enough. Because the thing about clients, real clients, the ones who value results over titles, is that they pay attention. They remember who answered their 9 p.m. emails, who followed up after system crashes, who built tools that actually made their work better. And they noticed when I disappeared. The first to reach out was Dr. Kwan, the Director of Technology at Paragon Health Systems. "We were told you resigned," he said on the call. "But we both know that's not the full story." He didn't sound angry, just tired. "We had questions about your data integrity system," he continued. "Logan said it wasn't critical, but we disagree. We were hoping you could walk us through it at your new firm." I paused. Not because I wasn't willing, but because it still felt surreal. 1 week earlier, I was being publicly humiliated. Now, clients were following me. Not because I'd asked them to, but because they trusted me. It wasn't about revenge. It was about value. And Logan had no idea how to hold on to it. By the second week, 3 more clients reached out. And back at Elixis, things were unraveling. I got the first true confirmation from Neha, an encrypted email she sent from her personal account. Logan called an emergency meeting, blamed the tech fallout on poor documentation, and said you left things disorganized. Half the team stared at him like he'd grown another head. She said Jaden had spoken up. "Actually," he told the room, "Mia documented everything. I saw it." It was quiet for a few seconds, Neha wrote. Then someone asked the question that finally broke the illusion. If Mia wasn't doing the work, why is everything collapsing without her? Logan couldn't answer. Because deep down he knew. He hadn't just deleted a folder. He'd deleted his own safety net. See, Logan never understood that real leadership isn't loud. It's not bravado in a boardroom or smooth-talking investors. Real leadership is consistency, delivery, trust built over time with people who remember how you treated them when no one was watching. And one by one, people started remembering. At Ethratech, we were moving fast. I was given full autonomy over the product roadmap. I built a team of hand-picked engineers, some of whom reached out after seeing where I landed. 2 of them were from Elixis. They'd had enough. We didn't need to steal clients. We didn't need to smear Logan. We just had to do better work. That's what made it worse for him. Because there was no scandal, no legal breach, no memo he could point to and say, "See? She cheated." There was only the quiet movement of trust. From him to me. And it was eating him alive. By week 3, the board at Elixis called an unscheduled meeting. I didn't attend, obviously. But I knew it happened. Because Gideon messaged me again. "Would you be open to a conversation?" "We're evaluating leadership changes." I never replied. The next day, the news broke internally. Logan had been removed from product oversight pending review. Neha sent me a 1-line update. The man who said women don't lead just lost everything because he refused to follow one. I stared at that sentence longer than I cared to admit. It didn't make me happy. Not exactly. Because this wasn't a victory I'd planned. It was a consequence he created himself. That's what some people never understand. They think when others succeed, it's luck, that people only rise by taking something from them. Logan thought silencing me would keep him in power, but silencing people doesn't erase their impact. And when people feel seen, heard, and respected, they remember the ones who treated them like they mattered, and the ones who didn't. By the end of my first month at Ethratech, we'd signed contracts with 5 former Elixis clients. Logan's product? Dead in the water. Our prototype? Already being tested in 3 pilot hospitals with overwhelmingly positive feedback. But the most powerful moment came quietly. Neha, now leading a research pod at Ethratech, stopped by my office. She didn't say anything at first, just stood in the doorway, arms crossed, smiling. "You know," she said, "when you left, I realized something. The only reason I stayed as long as I did was because you were there. You made it feel possible." I swallowed hard, because I hadn't known that. Not really. "It wasn't just that you built great systems," she continued. "It was that you made us believe we could too." That's when it hit me. Leadership isn't about controlling people. It's about inspiring them. And sometimes all it takes to lead is to leave a place that never let you. 2 months after I left Elixis Labs, I received an invitation to speak at a regional tech leadership summit. The theme was Human-Centered Innovation, Leading Beyond Metrics. I smiled when I read the title. If you followed my journey this far, you'll understand why. The summit had always been Logan's playground. He was a regular panelist, the kind of speaker who dazzled with big words and buzz phrases, always walking the stage like it was built just for him. So imagine my surprise when, a week before the event, I saw the updated schedule. Keynote, Mia Dalka, CTO, Ethratech. Panel moderator, Cora Eastman, co-founder, Ethratech. And beneath that, a smaller workshop listing. From engineer to executive, reclaiming your seat at the table. Canceled. Presenter, Logan Riker. That's when I knew. He was still trying to crawl back into the spotlight, but the room had moved on without him. I didn't need to say anything. I didn't tweet. I didn't comment on LinkedIn. Because the most elegant revenge is when you don't have to say a word. The truth walks into the room before you do. But the full story of Logan's fall, that came from a place I didn't expect. It was Gideon Talley, the former COO, who called me. His voice was quieter than I remembered. "I owe you an apology," he said. "I should have stepped in when Logan deleted your work. I saw it happen, and I did nothing." That silence I remembered from the conference room? Turns out it haunted more people than just me. "We underestimated you," he continued. "We assumed leadership looked like noise, authority, control. But you built trust without demanding attention." He paused. Then he asked the question I never expected to hear. "Would you consider consulting with Elixis again? Just for transition support?" "We've lost key accounts. Logan's contract wasn't renewed. We're trying to rebuild." I didn't respond right away. Not because I was bitter, but because I'd finally learned something. Not every bridge needs to be burned. Some just don't need to be rebuilt. So I said the only thing that felt right. "I appreciate the call, but I'm exactly where I need to be." And I was. By then, Ethratech had grown faster than we projected. We'd landed 3 more hospital contracts, expanded our engineering team, and launched a beta program that was already outperforming legacy systems in speed, security, and user satisfaction. More importantly, my team didn't just work for me. They believed in what we were building together. No one questioned why I was in charge. No one asked if I had the background. No one tried to delete my contributions, because when you finally walk into a room that was built for collaboration, not control, you stop surviving and start thriving. But the moment that truly marked the end of the story, it came through a message request on LinkedIn. From Logan. No subject line, just a single sentence. I didn't realize what I was destroying until it was gone. I read it twice, Then a third time. There was no ask, no apology, just a quiet recognition that everything he'd tried to erase had outlasted him. I didn't reply, because sometimes you don't need to respond. Sometimes the answer is already written. In client loyalty, in job titles earned, in silent conference rooms where your absence is louder than anyone else's voice. And I want you to know this. If you've ever been told you're too emotional to lead, if someone's tried to erase your work, belittle your presence, or silence your voice, if you've been made to feel like you need to shrink in order to survive, don't. Because your greatest power is not your ability to fight them. It's your ability to outlast them, to build while they try to tear down, to rise without dragging anyone with you. Logan taught me that revenge doesn't need fireworks. It just needs patience. And faith that when you lead with integrity, the right people will follow, and the wrong ones will expose themselves. Today, 2 years after I walked out of that boardroom with nothing but a ringing phone and my dignity, I lead a company that's reshaping the healthcare tech landscape. And Logan? He hasn't worked in leadership since. Because when the industry finally looked past the noise, they saw the truth. I still remember the email notification. All hands meeting, mandatory, 9:30 a.m., main conference room. It came in at 8:12 on a Thursday morning, too early for anything good. My stomach dropped the moment I saw it. I'd worked in corporate long enough to know that tone. No subject line, no details, just urgency wrapped in vague professionalism. The kind of message that doesn't say layoffs, but screams it anyway. My name is Samantha Ray. I'm 34. And for the past 8 years, I worked at Delta Core Solutions, a mid-sized tech firm in Portland. Or rather, I lived there. I was the one who stayed late when servers went down, who skipped lunches to review compliance documents, who quietly retrained employees when onboarding dropped the ball. When the pandemic hit and everyone else panicked, I learned new systems overnight, updated our protocols by hand, and kept the place afloat. But on that Thursday morning, none of it mattered. I walked into the conference room and felt the hush immediately. People sat stiffly, coffee cups clutched tightly like talismans. No one made eye contact. I sat near the back, my heart thudding so loudly I could barely hear the soft murmur of nervous whispers around me. Then the doors opened, and in walked Alan Reese, our chief operating officer, flanked by 2 HR reps. That's when it became real. Thank you for joining us this morning, Alan began, like this was just another company update. Today, we've made the incredibly difficult decision to initiate a round of workforce reductions. He paused as if expecting sympathy. This is part of a necessary restructuring as we align our budgets with future growth strategies. I wasn't shocked by the layoff itself. I'd heard the rumors like everyone else. What stunned me was when I checked my email 5 minutes later and saw the subject line, "Your employment status." And there it was. My name was on the list. First. I sat there frozen, reading the sterile paragraph over and over, unable to breathe. After everything I'd done, the extra hours, the missed birthdays, the Sunday nights spent fixing data mismatches, they didn't even have the decency to speak to me in person. I'd worked double shifts. I'd fixed critical bugs before they made it to launch. I was the only one in the company with a current Level 3 compliance certification, a credential they begged me to get, then never reimbursed me for. I stood up, slowly, aware that people were watching. Some had tears in their eyes. A few looked guilty, but no one said anything. At my desk, there was already a cardboard box waiting. Security didn't escort me, a tiny mercy, I guess. But as I packed up 8 years of my life, I couldn't stop shaking. Family photos. A stress ball shaped like a server tower. The coffee mug I won for Employee of the Quarter. Twice. 8 years, gone in 6 paragraphs. No severance package. Just 2 weeks insurance coverage and an offer to assist with my transition. The worst part? I didn't cry. I wanted to. I wanted to scream, slam a chair against the wall, demand answers. But all I did was nod. Quietly, like a professional. Like someone who hadn't just been gutted. When I stepped out into the gray Oregon drizzle, I wasn't just unemployed. I was untethered. Everything I had built my identity around, loyalty, hard work, being the one who held it all together, had just been treated like it meant nothing. I put the box in my car and sat behind the wheel for a long time. No music, no calls, just silence. I stared at my reflection in the rain-smeared window, and for the first time in a long time, I saw someone exhausted, used, discarded. But then, as the shock began to fade, something else began to rise. A quiet fury. Not rage, not revenge. Clarity. They didn't let me go because of budget cuts. They let me go because I made things look easy. Because I trained the team so well they thought I could be replaced by the people I mentored. Because I never asked for credit, never made noise, and never threatened to leave. They thought they'd won. They had no idea what was coming. Because 2 weeks before they blindsided me with that email, I had a conversation. One I hadn't told anyone about yet. Not even my closest friend in the company. It was with a recruiter from Calum Tech, a global cybersecurity and compliance firm. And as I sat there in my car, still clutching the layoff notice, my phone buzzed with a new message. Hi, Samantha. Congrats again. Legal has finalized your contract. We'd love to schedule onboarding for Monday. Welcome to Calum Tech 6 figures, full benefits, remote flexibility, a role built around the very skills Delta Core had taken for granted. I closed my eyes and let out a breath. They thought they were punishing me. But what they'd actually done was set me free. The Monday after my layoff, I woke up at 6:30 a.m. out of habit. No alarm, just muscle memory. For 8 years, that time meant brewing coffee, reviewing the ticket backlog, checking my team's schedules, and prepping for yet another urgent compliance meeting that should have been solved months ago. But that morning, I sat still at the kitchen table. No rush, no emails, no panicked Slack messages. Just the silence of my small Portland apartment. And the contract for my new job at Calum Tech, still sitting on the counter. I didn't sign it yet. Not because I had doubts, but because part of me needed time to mourn. Not the company. That was long gone. I was mourning who I had to become to survive in a place that never saw me. Back when I started at Delta Core, I was just 26. I'd landed the job after getting certified in risk and compliance systems. Not exactly a glamorous field, but one that required meticulous thinking, nerves of steel, and most of all, accountability. I was eager, sharp, hungry to prove myself. And for a while, I did. I stayed late to fix botched reports. I found discrepancies in regulatory filings that saved us from audit fines. I volunteered to mentor new hires. I was the go-to, the reliable one. You know what happens to the reliable one? They get buried in expectations. At first, it felt like trust. I was looped into high-level meetings, CC'd on everything. But soon I was doing everything. Writing documentation that wasn't mine. Fixing code I didn't break. Picking up calls after hours, just in case. When someone missed a deadline, I handled it. When a new hire was floundering, Samantha, can you just shadow them for a week? By year 4, I was basically running onboarding for the entire compliance division. Unofficially, of course. No title change. No raise. Just a slow shift into invisibility. My manager, Drew, always said the same thing. We know how valuable you are, Sam. You're the glue. Glue. I hated that word. Glue holds everything together, quietly, messily, unseen. And when it breaks, people don't blame the load. They blame the glue. I wasn't resentful at first. I told myself it would pay off. That loyalty meant something. Then came the new hires. Fresh out of grad school, underqualified, overconfident, and assigned directly to me. Samantha, can you train Jason on the compliance dashboard? Samantha, just loop Priya in. She'll be shadowing you. At one point, I was training 4 people while still doing my actual job, but it was a conversation from about 6 months before the layoff that stayed with me. It was after hours, and Drew had stopped by my desk while I was still typing out a critical client compliance report. You know, if we had 5 more Sams, this place would run itself. I gave a tired smile. Then maybe you'd let one of them have weekends off. He laughed. I didn't. Later that week, I submitted my first request for a compensation review. I outlined my certifications, project metrics, and team development work. I attached glowing client emails, positive audits, and even included market salary comparisons. Drew's reply came 48 hours later. Unfortunately, we're not in a position to adjust salaries this quarter. Let's revisit this in 6 months. 6 months later, I sent a follow-up. No reply. Instead, 2 months after that, I got an email asking me to lead compliance training for the entire company. No title, no bonus, just more hours, more unpaid labor. I did it anyway, because I still had hope. I still believed that showing up, really showing up, mattered. I didn't know it then, but that was the final test, and I passed it, just not in the way they expected. The recruiter from Calum Tech reached out shortly after that training session. She'd been forwarded one of the internal guides I'd written, anonymously, of course. It had circulated among their consultants as a gold standard in practical compliance rollout. They wanted to talk. I took the call. Quietly, cautiously. I told myself it was just a conversation. But the moment I spoke to their director of operations, I realized how much I'd been starving. Not just financially, but professionally. He knew what my certifications meant. He asked about the systems I'd patched. He valued the quiet work no one else ever saw. And then I got the offer. 6 figures. Leadership title. My own team. It felt surreal. I hadn't accepted it yet when the layoff came. But when it did, it was like the universe answered for me. All those years, I thought I was too essential to be discarded. But they had never valued me, only what I could do for them. And now, they were about to find out what happened when the glue walks away. Because 2 weeks later, almost to the day, Delta Core's compliance systems failed. And there was only one person who knew how to fix them. And she had just signed her contract with someone else. The email went out at 2:47 p.m. on a Wednesday. Subject, urgent, compliance system error. It was forwarded to me later by a former coworker. But at that moment, I was already sipping an iced coffee across town, sitting in a sleek glass office with my new Calum Tech badge clipped to my blazer. It had been 9 days since I left Delta Core. 9 days since I quietly packed up my desk, smiled at the receptionist, and walked out of that building for the last time. It felt like a lifetime ago. But for them, the real nightmare had just begun. Inside Delta Core's 7th floor office, panic was setting in. The compliance dashboard, the core system tracking client certifications, regulatory deadlines, and audit documentation had gone down. Not partially, fully. No access, no backups loading, no functioning escalation path. The issue wasn't just technical, it was operational. The new team had deployed an update to the internal tracking system. The same system I had manually patched and maintained for 6 years. It was never meant to be automated blindly. The protocols were too nuanced, too dependent on knowing the quirks and exceptions we'd built around client-specific regulations. But I was gone, and no one else knew the map. I got the first text from Jenna, one of the few people who'd reached out after the layoffs. Are you hearing what's happening at Delta Core? It's a disaster. Then Thomas, from IT, messaged me. Compliance system down. No one can even explain what went wrong. Drew looks like he's aged 10 years in an hour. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't care. A small part of me still did. But because I knew better than to get emotionally pulled back in. I'd spent years being their backup plan, their patch, their fixer. And where had that gotten me? Laid off, without warning, without gratitude. Number this time, they would face it without me. By Thursday morning, word had spread. 3 major clients were threatening to pause contracts. One, a government-adjacent tech firm, had already frozen operations pending audit confirmation. I heard Drew had locked himself in his office, frantically flipping through old email chains and half-written process manuals I'd left behind. The problem? I never documented the fail-safes. I couldn't. The system wasn't designed for it. Half the fixes I'd done were hard-coded overrides built over years of trial, error, and emergency intervention. They hadn't just let go of an employee. They had deleted their institutional memory. By noon, I got a call. Unknown number, but I recognized the voice immediately. "Hi, Samantha. It's Drew." There was a pause. I could hear tension in his voice. I waited. How are you?" he asked. The sheer awkwardness of that small talk after everything made me want to laugh, but I kept my tone neutral. "I'm well, settling into the new position." "Listen," he said, quickly shifting gears. "I won't waste your time. We've had some issues with the compliance dashboard. You were the only one who really understood how the override system worked, and I was wondering if—" "Drew," I said gently, "I no longer work at Delta Corps." I know, he rushed. "I'm not asking for anything big. Just maybe a call? Walk us through some of the old patches, or—" I let the silence hang for a second longer than was comfortable. "I'm not trying to be difficult," I said, "but I did ask for compensation for this work. For years. You remember that, don't you?" He went quiet. "Now, I'm leading the compliance architecture team at Calum Tech," I continued, "and I'm building something better, cleaner, sustainable." "I get it," he muttered. "No, Drew, I don't think you do," I said, keeping my voice even. "You didn't value the system while it worked because you never saw how fragile it was. And now that it's broken, you're realizing the cost." He exhaled sharply. "Is there anyone else we could talk to? Anyone you trained who could help?" That part broke me a little. Because yes, I trained half the team. I wrote the guides. I answered the late-night texts. But none of them had the experience. They weren't ready. And worse, they had been too afraid to speak up when I was dismissed. I gave him the cleanest answer I could. "You're going to need to rebuild it from scratch, and I suggest hiring a team who won't treat your best people as disposable next time." The call ended shortly after that. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady, like I had finally drawn a line in the sand between who I was, the glue that held a broken system together, and who I was becoming, the architect of something new. At Calum Tech, I was being invited to redesign a nationwide compliance platform. They trusted me, listened to me, paid me fairly. My calendar wasn't filled with emergencies. It was filled with strategy. That night, as I looked out at the city lights from my balcony, I received one final message. It was from Jenna. They brought in a consultant today. He told them it would take 4 to 6 months to rebuild what you did in-house. And that's just to get back to baseline. I typed a reply, then deleted it. Some things don't need a response. Let the silence speak. Because they hadn't just lost a system. They lost the one person who knew how to keep it from collapsing. And that finally wasn't my problem anymore. It wasn't until week 3 at Calum Tech that I finally started sleeping through the night. The insomnia had followed me like a shadow after the layoff. Not because I missed Delta Corps. That chapter was closed. But because even in freedom, I carried the habits they'd hardwired into me. The urgency, the hypervigilance, the need to be useful. For the first time in years, no one needed me at 11 p.m. There were no frantic, just one more favor messages, no missing audit flags waiting for me to catch them. It was unsettling and healing. My team at Calum Tech was small but sharp, and they listened. During onboarding, I suggested a shift in how we structured internal compliance mapping, and instead of dismissing me, the CTO brought it up in a leadership meeting. It was implemented the same week. I wasn't used to that. Every day, I woke up waiting for the catch. waiting for someone to tell me I'd overstepped or been too ambitious, but it never came. Instead, I got Slack messages asking for my thoughts. I got credit in meetings. I got a full lunch hour, uninterrupted. When I sent an out-of-office email, people actually respected it. The scars didn't vanish, but they stopped itching. Still, something tugged at me. Maybe it was the texts that kept trickling in from old Delta Corps coworkers, people who had survived the layoffs but now felt like the floor was crumbling beneath them. You were right, Samantha. They're overworking everyone. 3 people quit this week. No one trusts Drew anymore. They finally offered Priya a promotion, after 2 people left. She's furious. I didn't respond to all of them, but I read every word, because I remembered what it felt like to sit at that desk, to hear the silence after advocating for yourself, to smile through resentment just to survive another day. That's when an idea started forming. On a quiet Friday afternoon, I walked into my new director's office and asked if I could spearhead a mentorship initiative, one focused on career transition support for under-recognized compliance professionals. He blinked. You want to mentor people? Outside the company? Yes, I said. People who are stuck in broken systems. People like I used to be. To my surprise, he nodded almost immediately. Put together a proposal. I'll support it. That weekend, I wrote the framework for a pro bono workshop series, 1 Saturday a month. Resume audits, interview prep, negotiation tactics, confidence building. I called it the Invisible Experts Project. Because too many of us work in silence, afraid to ask for more, afraid to leave, because we're told the glue doesn't matter. That being essential is enough reward. It isn't. 2 weeks later, I held the first session. 5 women from various industries joined the Zoom call. They were quiet at first, unsure if they belonged, unsure if they were allowed to want more. But by the end, one of them, a single mom named Janelle, said something I haven't forgotten. I thought I was failing because I was exhausted all the time, but maybe I'm just exhausted because I've been doing 3 people's jobs without credit. Exactly. That's the lie we're fed. That burnout is personal weakness, not systemic abuse. That loyalty is noble even when it's one-sided. That speaking up makes us difficult. It doesn't. It makes us free. After that session, I received a LinkedIn message from someone I hadn't expected. Priya, the junior analyst I'd trained during my last year at Delta Corps. Hi, Samantha. I heard about the workshop. I'd love to join. Also, I just gave my notice. You helped me see I deserved better. Thank you. I stared at the message for a long time. Not because I was surprised, but because I realized something important. They'd tried to erase me, discard me like a broken part. But I hadn't just built systems. I'd built people. People who now saw their own value. That was the real legacy. And the more I embraced that truth, the more I understood the difference between leaving quietly and leaving with purpose. I hadn't burned a bridge. I'd lit a torch and handed it to the next person still in the dark. It was a gray Tuesday morning when I saw the subject line. Urgent request? Contracted assistance? It came from a Delta Corps email address, but not Drew's. This one was from a name I hadn't heard in over a year. Karen Voss, the company's chief legal officer. I opened the message slowly, half curious, half expecting more corporate cleanup. Hi, Samantha. I hope this finds you well. I'm reaching out regarding a critical compliance situation. Our external consultants have advised that portions of our legacy system cannot be restored without direct input from the original architect. Based on our records, that's you. We understand you're no longer with Delta Corps, and we respect that. However, we'd like to discuss a potential contracted engagement with appropriate compensation to help stabilize our systems before Q4 filings. Please let us know if you're open to a conversation. Karen Voss, Chief Legal Officer. I read it twice, then a third time. There it was, the final act. Not a demand, not a guilt trip. A request. Polite, careful, professional. From someone far higher up than Drew. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even tempted. I just felt something settle. like a book being closed after years of rereading the same painful chapter. By now, Delta Corps had lost 3 major clients. Their internal reviews had flagged multiple compliance breaches, and their external audit report, which I got a glimpse of through a friend in the industry, was scathing. They didn't want me back out of respect. They wanted me back because I was the only one who could fix what they had broken. The irony wasn't lost on me. I didn't reply right away. I spent the day thinking. Not because I needed the job. I didn't. Calum Tech was thriving, and my mentorship initiative, the Invisible Experts Project, had grown faster than I imagined. I just wanted to be sure. That night, I sat on my balcony again, the same place I had stared into the quiet the day I was laid off. The city below me was alive with lights, and inside, my inbox was filled with messages from mentees landing interviews, negotiating raises, and walking away from toxic jobs with their heads held high. I wasn't who I was a year ago, and I wasn't going back. The next morning, I replied, "Hi, Karen. Thank you for your message. I appreciate the outreach, but I must respectfully decline. While I understand Delta Corps' current challenges, I believe my departure and the circumstances surrounding it offered an important lesson about valuing internal talent before they become external assets. I wish you the best as you move forward with your consultants. Samantha Ray." No bitterness, no ego, just truth. A few hours later, I got a short response. "Understood. Thank you for your time. KV, I didn't need more. Closure doesn't always come with applause. Sometimes it comes quietly. Like finally stepping off a path that only led you in circles." 2 weeks after that, Calum Tech's board invited me to present our new modular compliance platform, a system I'd co-developed and would now lead into national deployment. At the end of the meeting, our CTO shook my hand and said, "This wouldn't have happened without you, Samantha. You didn't just help us build something, you helped change how we think about what leadership actually looks like." That stuck with me, because for years I thought leadership meant carrying everyone else, being the fixer, the last one out of the office, the quiet achiever. But real leadership? It's showing people their value before the breaking point. It's setting boundaries, not just picking up the slack. It's refusing to let your loyalty be weaponized against you. I used to think I was disposable. They made me believe that being useful was the same thing as being valued. But here, I wasn't just useful. I was seen. At the end of my presentation, I looked around that boardroom, at people who listened when I spoke, at systems built on trust, not desperation. And I realized I hadn't just found a new job. I had reclaimed my worth. One of my mentees, a woman named Leah who had recently left a hostile finance firm, said something in our last group session that brought tears to my eyes. I kept thinking I had to prove I was irreplaceable. But the truth is, I never was. I was just ignored. I told her what I had finally come to believe. You don't have to be irreplaceable to be valuable. You just have to believe that the right people will see you before it's too late. That's what Delta Corps never understood. They didn't lose me because I left. They lost me because they never believed I would. And by the time they realized what they had, I was already building something they'd never get access to again. Success isn't revenge. Self-respect is. And I had finally found mine.